I'm Michael Montero for Boxing Monthly, back from holiday, and you're watching the Neutral Corner for December 19th. All right, so back from a nice, much needed vacation. You can see I haven't shaved yet. I'm going to take care of all that tonight before I get back to work on the grind here in Los Angeles. But for those of you who don't know, I'm originally from Detroit, and I went back to my hometown. It was about an 8-9 day vacation, spent a few days there, drove about 4 hours to Toronto, spent a little time there, came back to Detroit, and then I drove up to the very top of Michigan. If the state of Michigan is basically a glove, it's a mitt, Detroit's down here. I drove all the way to the top to Mackinac City, drove over the Mackinac Bridge to the Upper Peninsula. So Michigan kind of looks like a hand and you're calling the timeout. We went up to the timeout part and hung out, and there's a little island up there, Mackinac Island. Hung out up there, and it's a seasonal kind of area. You know, it's more popular during the summer, but because it's winter time, it was dead, which was actually great. There was only like 3 or 4 restaurants open. There was nobody there, no tourists. It was so nice to get the hell out of Los Angeles. Tiffany and I went and just got away from the traffic, from the madness. I didn't tweet much. I didn't Facebook much. So anyway, just wanted to talk a little bit about my trip for the ring walk. So let's get into that. As I said, not going to do a ring walk question this week because I haven't been tweeting or anything much. I just want to talk a little bit about the city of Detroit. And, you know, there's a lot of negative talk about it, and for good reason. You know, obviously it's a town with a lot of boxing traditions. So see behind me some of the pictures and stuff. This is of Crunk Gym in Detroit. The old Crunk Gym. Now, there is a new Crunk Gym that they just opened. It's out of the city center. They moved it out. I haven't had a chance to go to it, but I wanted to show you guys the old Crunk Gym ruins. It's, you know, it's kind of a sentimental thing for me. You know, a lot of heroes in Detroit came up at this gym, and the late great Emanuel Stewart, one of the best trainers in boxing history, he did a lot of his work here. This is actually a recreation center. It wasn't just a boxing gym, but upstairs in the main room, you know, you see it now, man. It's so crazy. I remember there was a ring up there, heavy bags, speed bags, and everything, and the pros would go downstairs. There's actually a downstairs and an upstairs. And, you know, they would go down there. But you could, pretty much anyone off the street, you could come in there, you could work out. There was a few other rooms. It was a really big building, and it's just gone, man. The building actually, vandals came in and stripped the wire out of the walls, like the copper, because that's a big thing in Detroit with all the abandoned buildings. A lot of people have run in and done that, taken all the copper and just any kind of materials they could take. They could strip from the walls and stuff, and they sell it. And a lot of Chinese manufacturing companies actually buy this stuff, and they freight it over and everything like that. So now you see all the graffiti in there and everything. It was just surreal for me to walk into that building and walk around. And the area, there's just a lot of abandoned houses. A lot of houses have just been torn down by the city because they were abandoned for decades and they were falling apart. There's certain buildings in Detroit, well, I mean, tens of thousands of buildings are vacant. They've been like that forever, and they're falling apart to where the city, you know, they've demolished some of them already, but some of them they block off. They won't even let you go inside because there's danger literally of collapsing on you when you walk in. And so they've blocked it off and they have it marked for demolition. But the city's broke and they're way behind on that stuff. So there's literally tens of thousands of structures that you can just walk in and see. Not always, you know, obviously not the best neighborhoods, but because I'm from there, I know where to go or not to go during the day. Obviously, you know, there's certain areas that you don't go at night. But taking Tiffany there, who grew up in Southern California, in San Diego, and has lived in Los Angeles now for about 5 or 6 years. It was interesting to see her reaction to it. Whenever I take somebody to Detroit and take them around some of those neighborhoods, it's interesting to watch the reaction. And but at the same time, I took Tiffany to some of the beautiful parts of Detroit, and there really still is some beauty there, and most of the beauty is in the people. Wonderful, wonderful people, so down to earth. I got to see some family and friends while we were out there. I didn't get to see everybody. I never can. That's just how it is. A few of you guys, who follow me and stuff, I know. I'm sorry I wasn't able to get up with you. Do it next time, I promise. Next time when I come out, I definitely just want to stay in Detroit for like a week instead of just bouncing around. But I just kind of wanted to show Tiffany that whole general, greater area, because she's never been to that part of the country. And there really is a lot of beauty there. So it's a mixture of good and bad. For me, it was a mixture of a lot of reminiscing of my childhood and stuff, good memories, but then also a lot of bad memories, man. So it's always a mixture of emotions for me when I go back home. But back here in SoCal, we got a lot of boxing to catch up on. So let's get with the review of the last couple weeks of action. Okay, so Saturday, December 5th at Barclays in Brooklyn, Daniel Jacobs scored a first-round knockout over Peter Quillin, defending his WBA regular title. There I go with the quotes again. Becoming famous for my air quotes. I use them so much. But I use the air quotes because, look, Gennady Golovkin is I think they call it the super champion. I can't even keep up with the WBA and all their freaking names. Chris Eubank Jr. is the interim champion. The three of those fighters are never gonna fight each other, so whatever. But for Daniel Jacobs, look, I picked Peter Quillin to win. You guys, who watched the last episode of the Neutral Corner, you know that. I just thought that Peter Quillin had the better resume as a pro. Jacobs had the better resume as an amateur, obviously, but Quillin had been in there with the better fighters, and he didn't look great against Andy Lee. They had a draw earlier this year, and Quillin struggled, missed weight for that fight. He made weight for this one. He looked on point, so I thought Quillin would win a decision in a competitive fight. But man, Jacobs went out there and clipped him early and did not let up. And I was in the hotel room in downtown Detroit, and watching a stream of this on my laptop, and I was like, holy shit, I just was not expecting that. And you guys who follow me on Twitter, I immediately tweeted like, yo, young guys learning how to fight right now, don't be so damn proud to not take a knee when you're hurt, to not hold. And Quillin wouldn't hold when he got hurt. He wouldn't take a knee. And, maybe some of that was him just not knowing how to do that, right? But it's interesting because he had a little more weight on him and was a little stronger against Andy Lee earlier this year. And Andy Lee dropped him, straight up dropped him, and he recovered. This time against Danny Jacobs, he got clipped with a shot. And even though he didn't go down, and he appeared to be in better shape in this fight, it was the kind of shot where he looked more hurt and he just didn't know how to react. In those situations, if you don't feel like you can hold, if your legs are gone, take a knee. Take a knee, bro. You're gonna get a 10 count, get up at the count of 8, clear the cobwebs. Yeah, you're down 10-8 in that round, but you survived the round. But he didn't do that. I thought he was a little too proud and kind of didn't know how to react. And now, where does Peter Quillin go from here? These types of losses happen, but he's already hurt because he had that draw with Lee, missed weight. We think he's probably gonna be at 168 soon. If I had to guess for Quillin, he's gonna probably fight for one of those titles that Al Heyman has at 168 next year or something, right? He's still a good fighter. Maybe moving up in weight will help him take those shots better, I don't know. For Daniel Jacobs, he's the king of Brooklyn, right? He wins the Battle of Brooklyn. He's the true Brooklynite. Peter Quillin really wasn't a Brooklynite. He claimed it, but he was from Michigan. And You know, I like Danny Jacobs. He's one of the real good guys in boxing. This is a real feel-good story for him to come back, not only from that devastating KO loss to probably the best fighter he's ever fought as a pro, Dmitry Pirov, but to come back from cancer, man. No opponent is gonna be tougher than cancer. So for him to do that, and he's just a good person. He's a good father. He's just a good guy. You know, I want to root for Daniel Jacobs, but he's not going to fight the guy we want to see him fight. He's not going to fight Gennady Golovkin. I don't even think he's going to fight Canelo Alvarez. So as much as I want to root for him, who are we going to see him fight? I don't know. I do think it's possible that we could see him fight Chris Eubank Jr. We've seen Al Heyman work with some of the British promoters, right? He's got some British fighters, so maybe we could see that one. And that's a pretty interesting fight if it happens later next year. Now, that following Monday, this is a fight I forgot about, but in Thailand, Amnat Ruenroeng, he is a Thai flyweight, improved his record to 17-0, only 5 knockouts, not a real big power puncher, but he's a awkward, crafty kind of guy. And he beat Japanese fighter Byung Ho Lee. The reason why I mentioned Ruenroeng is because he's the guy who upset Zhou Shiming earlier this year in March. Really wasn't much of an upset because Zhou Shiming, you know, he kind of is what he is. He's not the big demon as a pro that the promoter was trying to make him out to be. But Ruenroeng beat Zhou Shiming, and it was a high-profile fight. And that put him kind of on the map. And he's got a fan base now out there in Asia, especially in Thailand, where most of his fights have been. And then he beat a Filipino fighter, Jonriel Casimero, earlier this year, quality fighter. He's had a good year. He is 3-0 this year against 3 quality opponents. None of them are world beaters, but quality opponents. And he's got a title. I'd love to see this guy in Chocolatito fight next year. Let's see some unification in the flyweight division, right? That Friday, December 11th in San Juan, Puerto Rico, Nonito Donaire scores a unanimous decision over Cesar Juarez of Mexico. The scores were 116-110 twice and 117-109. He wins a vacant 122-pound title. For Donaire, he's 3-0 in 2015. Again, not the greatest opposition, but he lost to Nicholas Walters last year at featherweight, 126, and that was a bad loss for him. Moved back down to a $122. He's looked a lot better. Do I think he's the best at 122 pounds? No, but he's got a title right now, and he's in the mix for a big fight. So good for Nonito Donaire. Nice looking victory for him, and a very, very fun, fan-friendly fight. I thought Donaire clearly won it. It was a decisive victory, but there was a lot of two-way action. A candidate for fight of the year, but I wouldn't call it a fight of the year. Obviously, the big event on that card, Felix Verdejo, Puerto Rico's next big star in the making, it would seem. He scores a second-round knockout, and he's 3-0 with 2 knockouts in 2015. So he's, I think, next year poised to make that step from prospect to contender. We got to see him step up a little bit in opposition. He had some nagging injuries this year, but he looks ready, man. He looks like the goods. This past Saturday, a lot of boxing all over the place, but I want to talk about this fight in Moscow. Roy Jones Jr. took a bad knockout loss via Enzo Maccarinelli. I believe it was a right hand over the top. Kind of hit him in the temple, but it was accumulation. Enzo Mac was just teeing off on him, and he kind of was smothering his shots for a second. I think he had Roy Jones up on the ropes, if I'm remembering correctly, and he just took a half step back, came over with that right hand. Roy fell face first, which we've seen Roy do a few times now. Scary type of knockout. And look, this fight, Roy Jones, Enzo Maccarinelli, these are 2 guys that should not be fighting, right? Should not be fighting. Let's start with Enzo Maccarinelli. He was KO'd 4 times between 2008 and 2010. And we thought his career was done then. He's been KO'd 7 times overall. He's 35 years old. He's a very old 35. Roy Jones Jr. was knocked out in 2 consecutive fights against Antonio Tarver, and Glenn Johnson. That was back in 2004. Man, that was over a decade ago. Think about that. He's been KO'd 5 times overall. He's 46. And I don't want to say he's an old 46 because he's not. He's just 46. You should not be fighting at that age unless you're a guy like Bernard Hopkins or Vladimir Klitschko's almost 40. Floyd Mayweather's getting up there in age. Those are guys that rely on defense and positioning and holding, not necessarily reflexes to win fights. And Roy was all about reflexes and athleticism, right? So let's talk a little more about Roy Jones Jr. This is becoming a very, very sad story. You go back to 2002, he TKO'd Clinton Woods. And at that point, he was the best fighter from 160 to 175 pounds. He was considered pound for pound the top guy. He had only lost once. That was the DQ in his qualification against Montero Griffith, which he avenged. And, we all thought it was bullshit anyway. He got robbed in the Olympics. He should have had a gold medal in the Olympics, right? He was seen at that time as one of the best ever. He had some criticisms, mainly that he wouldn't fight outside the United States. And there was some very good European fighters that he didn't face. Now, those fighters weren't very willing to come to the United States to fight Roy, but Roy never fought anywhere but America up until that time. But that was really his only criticism, was some of the opposition, right? He was seen as just a monster. And then the steroids, and he moved up in weight and fought at heavyweight against John Ruiz, who had a paper title, and nobody considered him a real champion. And he came back down, and phasing off of steroids, when you gain that much weight, it just affects your body, and he just wasn't the same. And then the 2 knockout losses, and the doping scandal, and fighting well beyond his years, and some of the controversial things he said, it's just really tarnished his legacy. And for a lot of these young fans who see this version of Roy and didn't see the guy in the 90s who really was a special fighter, it's such a shame. Roy's one of those guys, I mentioned how he wouldn't fight outside of America. Well, now he can barely get sanctioned in America, right, for a big fight. He has fought in Russia a few times recently, but he's also fought in Australia, in Poland, in Latvia. The guy who wouldn't leave America to fight the Polish fighter, Dariusz Michalski, or I can't remember exactly how to say the last name, but he's a very good fighter over in Germany. He was based. He wouldn't go over there, but he fought in Latvia recently, right? It's just becoming a sad story, and he's one of those guys that's somebody in his life, and I'm hoping the guys at HBO will be the ones who step up and just say, dude, enough. This is getting really bad. Enzo Maccarinelli is a guy who, he's bigger than Roy Jones. He's about 6'3". I think Roy's like 5'11". He's a bigger guy. Fought at cruiserweight for a long time. Hits pretty hard. Enzo Mac hits pretty hard. Roy has no business being in the ring if he can't defeat a guy like Enzo, because as big as he is, Enzo's chinny, and look, I'm sorry, back in Roy's prime, he would have walked right through Enzo Maccarinelli. So if he can't beat that level fighter right now, Roy, why are you fighting? Somebody at HBO, get in this guy's ass and tell him, look, if you don't stop fighting, we're not gonna let you commentate for us anymore. It needs to get to that point. One last point about this, I talked about it in the last Neutral Corner, how Roy Jones, during the Vladimir Klitschko-Tyson Fury fight, made several kind of comments about, oh, it's not Vladimir's age that's affecting this fight, and stuff like that. And made comments about Klitschko's chin, and this, it kind of looks bad now, okay? Because Roy, I thought it looked bad then, but now it looks really bad. Because it's pretty obvious that the age factor is in Roy's head, and the chin factor is in Roy's head. And that's why he makes comments like that about other fighters. Vladimir Klitschko is 6 years younger than Roy. Vladimir Klitschko has a better chin than Roy Jones. Yeah, I said it. Go ahead and hate on me. He does. He always had a better chin than Roy Jones. And for Roy to, and Vlad's not the only guy Roy's kind of picked on, but for Roy to kind of go there, it just shows that he's thinking about those things in himself. Just another reason why he shouldn't be fighting anymore. Please, guys, somebody step up and do the right thing with Roy Jones. Also Saturday, there was a PBC card in San Antonio, Texas. Charles Martin and Dominic Breazeale, undefeated heavyweights, were supposed to fight each other, but in light of the IBF stripping Tyson Fury, Charles Martin and Vyacheslav Glazkov are the two top contenders. They're going to fight for the vacant title. And I guess Charles Martin and his people felt it wasn't worth taking the risk fighting Dominic Breazeale, so they pulled out of that fight. You know, I understand that move. I don't love it. I think that, you know, I favored Charles Martin to beat Dominic Breazeale, but considering all of that, and look, maybe it came from management, maybe it came from Al Heyman, and who knows. But they pulled out. That fight didn't happen, and that was kind of an interesting heavyweight fight. But we got a different heavyweight fight. Chris Arreola won a split decision over Travis Kaufman. He gets the scores 114, 113 twice, and one judge had Kaufman 114, 113. Chris was down in the third round and appeared to just be gassed and being outworked in the late rounds by Kaufman. I haven't seen this fight. I've just seen little snippets of it, haven't seen the whole thing yet. But from everything I've heard from the people I've talked to, Chris Arreola kind of got a gift here. And this is the second gift he received this year, because earlier this year he had a draw with Fred Cassie back in July. A lot of people felt that that shouldn't have been a draw. They felt that Cassie should have won. Earlier this year, Arreola went life and death with Curtis Harper, who is a journeyman level heavyweight. Chris weighed in at 262 pounds for that fight. And so his excuse was, hey man, I was fat, I was out of shape, blah, blah, blah. Well, he weighed 236 for this fight. He got his fat ass in shape. He's dropped about 30 pounds this year. And still, most people felt lost to Travis Kaufman, who, you know, is I'd say, better than a journeyman, maybe a fringe contender, kind of heavyweight, but kind of a journeyman. So look, Chris is another guy where I don't know what he's fighting for anymore, unless somewhere down the line there's possibly a title shot at that title that Al Heyman bought from Don King. I don't know, but he's one of those guys where, you know, probably fighting on a bit too long now, taking way too much punishment. In the main event of that fight, that card, Omar Figueroa won a unanimous decision over Antonio DeMarco. Scores are 115, 113 twice, 116, 112. Look, for Omar Figueroa, who's fought his whole career 135 to 140 pounds, he weighed 151 pounds for this fight. I don't know what the hell happened. He weighed 141 in his May victory over Ricky Burns. So 10 pounds was gained in between there. I don't know what happened, but it's one thing to weigh in 2 or 3 pounds over, but 10 pounds? He's a young guy. He's a young guy, and young guys shouldn't have problems making weight like that. So I don't know if Omar is going up to welterweight, but you know, he's never punched very hard. He had the best, I thought, chance of being a title, a champion. I think he held a title, but a real champion at lightweight. At welterweight, man, that's a loaded division. I don't know if he can get it done there. But there was a big card that same Saturday over in London in the O2. And look, the promoters over there put together some great cards this year, just stacked with fights. Just the guys, Kevin Mitchell scored a victory on this card. Tony Bellew, Chris Eubank Jr., who I talked about earlier, Paulie Malignaggi, Derek Chisora, remember him? They all got W's. That's a lot of fighters. That's a lot of talent on a card. It's pretty fun. But the fight that everyone's talking about, of course, Anthony Joshua scores a 7th round TKO over Dillian Whyte and avenges an amateur loss that took Dillian Whyte. But look, this just proves, guys, the pros and the amateurs, two different worlds. And a lot of times in the amateurs, you get a really, really young guy, he might be 17 years old, going up against a grown man who's 20, 21. And I don't know these two fighters' ages, but I do believe that Dillian Whyte was the older, more experienced amateur when these two fought. There was a little bit of a mental factor there, though, because Dillian Whyte buzzed Anthony Joshua early. I want to say it was the second round. And to Joshua's credit, instead of panicking and everything like that and thinking about that amateur loss, you know, he got it together. It took a round or two to get his wits back. He weathered that storm, and then he started boxing again. And you saw the difference in skill set. You saw the difference in athleticism, in speed and power and technique. You just see the growth of Anthony Joshua just happening before our eyes, right? Gets the 7th round knockout, scores a devastating knockout. Whyte was, you know, out. That was another case of a guy, you know, Whyte was buzzed, probably should have took a knee, probably should have held on. He tried to hold on a little bit, but Joshua was just so much stronger, pushed him off, finished the show. And there's some people out there calling Anthony Joshua a top 10 heavyweight now. Guys, we need to slow down with that. Joshua appears to be the goods, but he hasn't fought a top 10 fighter yet. I think Anthony Joshua is clearly a top 20 heavyweight based on what we've seen. But there's other guys out there like Joseph Parker has a comparative record. Joseph Parker 17-0 with 15 knockouts. Anthony Joshua is 15-0 with 15 knockouts. Arguably, they have the same level resume. They fought the same level opposition. You know, Anthony Joshua has fought exclusively in England. Parker has fought pretty much in New Zealand, where he's from. I think he might have left once and gone to Germany or something, if I'm not mistaken. Don't quote me on that. But he's pretty much fought exclusively in his homeland as well. So neither of these guys have traveled. But just to give you an example, Jarrell Miller, an American heavyweight, he's 15-0 with 13 knockouts. There's a German heavyweight, I'm going to butcher this name, Erkan Tepper, 15-0, 10 knockouts. Lucas Brown, Australian, 23-0, 20 knockouts. Andy Ruiz Jr., an American, 26-0, 17 knockouts. I could keep going. There's a lot of prospects out there now with similar records to Anthony Joshua. Now, Joshua looks more exciting than most of these guys, and he has that build. He's the prototypical, stereotypical heavyweight we think about in this era, the super heavyweight, the big 6'6" athletic frame. But let's not get ahead of ourselves, all right? Baby steps. At this point, Anthony Joshua looks to be the heir apparent, but we got to see him against the top 10 guy before we go too crazy. But man, he's fun to watch. Anytime this dude fights, I'm going to be watching. This Friday, it's PBC on Spike from Las Vegas. This is the last scheduled PBC event of the year. Wow. Man, it's almost 2016. This is crazy. It's hard to get very excited for this one, but there's free boxing on TV Friday. So Denis Shakivov. I'm going to say that again. Denis Shafikov of Russia, I think that's right, is going up against Cuban Rances Bartolome, undefeated amateur standout, had, I want to say, 200 amateur fights, really good amateur fighter, but not the most exciting pro fighter, just kind of typical of a lot of the Cuban amateur standouts, right? Shafikov, the Russian, doesn't punch with a lot of power. Bartolome probably has the better power, he just doesn't use it. But the only thing I know about this Russian that stands out to me is he lost to Miguel Vasquez in Macau last year for a title. Even though this Russian, Shafikov, lost that title to Vasquez, which was for the IBF lightweight title, this fight right here is for the vacant IBF lightweight title. So, to me, this just looks like a way for Al Heyman and the PBC folks to hand over a title to one of their Cuban fighters. So expect Bartolome to win a decision in a very, very dull fight. The fight I'm actually interested in is the co-feature, where undefeated Detroit-based southpaw Isaiah Thomas, who's 15-0, only 6 knockouts, is going up against Murat Gassiev, another Russian, who's 6'3" fighter as well, tall guy. These are both tall guys. These are cruisers. And he punches with a lot more power, though. Has more knockouts on his record. Isaiah Thomas came out of the Crunk system, was actually trained as a youth by Emanuel Stewart before his passing. Interesting note about him, he lost to Deontay Wilder in the 2007 Golden Gloves. That's how skinny Deontay Wilder was. That guy was under 200 pounds at that time. But Isaiah Thomas, you might recognize that name. The great Detroit Pistons star, one of the best point guards in NBA history. My favorite player growing up as a kid. He was the favorite player for a lot of kids in Detroit. Thus, there were a lot of Isaiah Thomases born in the Detroit area throughout the mid to late 80s and up into the early 90s. I've known of, I swear, 4 or 5 Isaiah Thomases myself in the Detroit area born around that time. It's just, just is what it is. But Isaiah Thomas, for a Crunk fighter, does not punch very hard, and he's kind of boring, and could stink the joint out here. The Russian, he punches, like I said, with a lot more power. I don't have his record in front of me. I believe he's undefeated. Much more opposition, better opposition as a pro. He's traveled, he's fought in multiple countries, a good amateur record. So, this to me will be the better fight of the two on this card. You might want to check it out. But the real fun card is going to be Saturday. Actually, we got 2 of them on both sides of the pond. Let's talk about this one in Manchester. Andy Lee is defending his middleweight title against Billy Joe Saunders. This fight was delayed, obviously, because of injuries. It was supposed to happen earlier in the year. But finally it's here. I think it's going to be an interesting fight. For Lee, he's coming off that draw with Quillin that I talked about earlier. He hasn't looked very good in recent fights. Even against Matvey Korobov and some other recent fights he's had, he was losing, right? I think he fought Julian Jackson, he was losing, and that right hook has bailed him out. And the right hook actually helped him out against Quillin because it dropped Quillin later in that fight after Lee had been on the deck a couple times. And that's what helped him get that draw. So that right hook, the power shots, they've bailed him out, his power, but he hasn't looked very good. For Billy Joe Saunders, he got that close win over Chris Eubank Jr. earlier this year. This should be an interesting fight, man. And I look for Andy Lee to win this one. I just think he's so much more experienced. And for the sake of boxing, I'm kind of pulling for Andy Lee as well. He's another Crunk guy trained by Emanuel Stewart. So that, I've always had a soft spot for Andy Lee for that reason. But he was willing to fight Gennady Golovkin, I want to say last year, before family issues got in the way and canceled that fight from happening. But it might have been last year, maybe the year before. I want to say it was 2014. If Andy Lee wins this fight, I absolutely believe he would fight Gennady Golovkin. If that fight doesn't work out, he fought Peter Quillin earlier this year, so he's worked with the PBC before. He'd fight Danny Jacobs. Either way, we're going to get a unification. Now, if Billy Joe Saunders wins, I don't know if he's going to fight another titleist. I don't know if the promotional situation there will work out to where that'll happen. So if Andy Lee gets the win, we get a fight we want to see next year. Of course, we want to see him fight Golovkin, but even if he doesn't, if he fights Danny Jacobs, that's still a fight we want to see. And in New York, that fight would sell very, very well. Really, either way, if he fights Golovkin or Jacobs, it's got to be in New York. It's a no-brainer. So I'm favoring Andy Lee to win this fight, but Billy Joe Saunders, very, very live dog. Also on this fight, Liam Smith is defending his 140-pound title that he won back in October versus Manchester native Kilrain Kelly. The fight's in Manchester, so you figure Kelly's going to bring a fan contingent out. That should be a fun fight as well. Also Saturday, here in the States, in Verona, New York, upstate New York, Luis Ortiz, the undefeated Cuban heavyweight, coming off his win on the Triple G undercard, Triple G Lemieux undercard a couple months back, is going up against Jennings. Philadelphia fighter, tough guy, one loss, and that was to Vladimir Klitschko in a very competitive fight earlier this year in New York. This should be a fun heavyweight fight. I'm really, really excited for this one. Look, both these guys are listed 6'3". They list Ortiz at 6'4". I think he's more like 6'3". 84-inch reach. If Ortiz comes in shape, he's in the 230s. Jennings comes in at the 220s, right? Jennings has fought the better opposition as a pro. Even before fighting Vladimir Klitschko, he's fought the better professional opposition. For Ortiz, though, the amateur record, it's not even close. You know, Jennings had an amateur record of 13-4. Ortiz, they list his at 343-19. You know, Ortiz comes in with that southpaw style. Jennings does the peekaboo and tries the counter shot. I think Jennings is going to have the longer arms, actually, of the two fighters. And that's going to make it interesting. How does he rebound from that first professional loss? This is only his second fight of the year, his first fight since that loss. How does Ortiz fare against his best professional opponent? You know, the best opponent Ortiz has fought as a pro, I think, is Latif Coyote. That was back in 2014, last year, and it was changed to a no contest because Ortiz failed a drug test. So, you know, how does he do against Jennings, who's clearly the best opponent he's faced yet as a pro? I don't know, but I'm excited for that one. On the undercard, Nicholas Walters comes back from, I think he's only had one fight so far this year. So he's trying to get busy again. And that fight earlier this year, he couldn't make the featherweight limit. So, you know, let's see how he looks on the scales. You know, he's trying to get back down to featherweight. He's a really, really big featherweight, man. He looks like a lightweight. So I'm excited to see him back. Yuriorkis Gamboa, he's had contract issues and stuff like that. This is his first fight of the year. He's an exciting fighter. You know, of all those Cuban guys we talk about, he's the most exciting one. All these Cuban amateur standouts. And the thing, you know, Gamboa takes an L sometimes. He took an L against Terrence Crawford last year, but so what? He's exciting. And, you know, he was probably a little too small to be fighting Crawford. He needs to kind of move back down in weight too. You know, kind of like Nonito Donaire did, you know? So let's see how Gamboa looks. He's always exciting, man. But that's it. Long episode. Had to get caught up on everything. It's good to be back. I want to shave and wash my hair and just get resettled. I'll see you guys next week. So this was the main room inside the Kronk. And there was a ring over there, bags, heavy bags along that wall. Obviously none of this graffiti was here. There was just that couple fans up there. But they kept it real hot. It's crazy, man.